is Jim, but most people call me Jim.
Gene Wilder at last tells us what everyone who liked blazing saddles never understood. To appreciate its influence, the film can be reduced to only 3 words: dare to break rules. The 1974 Western spoof wasn't just a box office phenomenon, but a landmark in American film history, brave enough to go beyond every limit of comedy, satire, and artistic liberty. Few were aware of the behind-the-scenes chaos, secrets, accidents, and creative wars that populated the off-screen Blazing Saddles universe and almost derailed the production before it could take off. Gene Wilder, who finally got to play the unforgettable Waco Kid, had a lot of little-known anecdotes about those times, from scary moments that had threatened the survival of the film to crazy decisions from director Mel Brooks, such as shoving towels into actors' mouths just to prevent the crew from spoiling takes with uncontainable laughter. Behind the sophisticated wit that delighted millions of fans lay a tale of failure, salvation, and inspired creation, and Wilder's part in all of it is still one of the most significant but least heralded aspects of Hollywood legend. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. The catastrophe started even before the lights had even had a chance to warm up. The part of the Waco Kid, the gunslinger down on his luck who would prove Wilder's most understated triumph, wasn't even his to start with. Mel Brooks had already cast the part with Gig Young, a veteran Hollywood actor and Oscar winner, who, on paper, had just the exhausted gravitas the part required. But when the cameras started rolling on the first day of production, the horror show began. Young started sweating uncontrollably, his hands trembling, his speech slurred. Some even suspected it was going to be a method performance, a decision to depict the kid's alcoholism in gritty, lived-in detail. But it soon became appallingly evident that this was no acting. Young was in the grip of acute alcohol withdrawal. By noon, he had collapsed on set, the crew converging on him as production came to a standstill. Brooks's movie was suddenly on the verge of implosion. A lead role was vacant, cash was burning hourly, and Warner Brothers executives were already uneasy about the edgy material in the film. Brooks had just one choice remaining, and he knew just the person to call. Gene Wilder was in New York when the phone began to ring. The conversation was brief, only a few sentences in length. Brooks asked if he might visit. Wilder requested one thing: "Do you want me there?" Brooks answered yes, and Wilder said, "Then I'll be there." He didn't ask about the pay, the length of the contract, or even which role it was. Within 24 hours, Wilder was on a plane, arriving on set with no rehearsals and no preparation, stepping straight into the Waco Kid's boots, as if he'd been waiting for the character all his life. What had the potential to be a disaster became salvation. Wilder saved the production, and he redefined the role in the process. From the outset, Wilder imposed one stipulation: Waco Kid would not be played for laughs. This might sound peculiar in a film that lived on absurdity, slapstick, and outrageous parody, but Wilder understood that the key to comedy was contrast. Where Cleavon Little, Harvey Korman, and Madeline Kahn embodied the manic flair, he became the calm eye of the hurricane, a guy shattered by his own past, exhausted, ironic, and so deadpan that each word he uttered cut sharper. His delivery was as dry as bones, his reactions measured to the last detail, and the sadness in his eyes provided people with a sort of haunted laughter. Lying sprawling on a jail bunk, half-dozing, mumbling his introduction in a voice so level it was heartbreaking, Wilder made what could have been an afterthought joke one of the movie's most memorable moments. Mel Brooks has referred to Waco Kid as the backbone of the film, the character that kept the mayhem from getting away from the filmmakers. Wilder's brilliance was in realizing that at times, silence is the most hilarious sound of all. The Waco Kid had a mystery that went deeper than people caught on to. He wasn't merely a sidekick, and he wasn't merely comic relief. He was once the fastest gun in the West, a legend now shattered by booze and despair. Wilder acted him not as a clown, but as a tragic character whose sadness became the counterpoint to all the absurd satire circling around him. His shaking hand, his empty stare, the manner in which his voice went down to almost a whisper when he was confessing about his past, everything suggested a man who had witnessed too much and couldn't seem to find his way back. This added layer of tragedy hardened the comedy, did not soften it. The funniest people, as Wilder liked to point out, are the hurt ones. Pain in Waco Kid never bursts. It seethes, festers just below the surface, keeping viewers uncomfortable even when they were laughing. The irony was that the pandemonium on the screen was equaled, and in some cases exceeded, by pandemonium off the screen. Warner Brothers despised the script. They despised the profanity, the racial satire, the political jabs, and insisted on cuts. They wished to sanitize the racial slurs, remove the more vitriolic attacks on American hypocrisy, and water down anything that would offend. The studio threatened to shut the entire production down at more than one point. Mel Brooks struggled like a madman to hold on to his vision, but he was not alone. Gene Wilder, neither director nor producer, but his unobtrusive general nonetheless. In private conversations, Wilder encouraged Brooks to hold firm, reminding him that the whole point of comedy was to make someone uncomfortable, to make them confront truths they'd rather not. If they trimmed the rough edges, Wilder said the movie would be just another goofy parody. His placid but firm endorsement provided Brooks with the impetus to continue battling, and his reputation following the producers was strong enough to cause the executives to waver. Wilder's mere presence became a bulwark, refusing to let the script be gutted. On location, there was little less tranquil. Brooks insisted on constant reshoots, frequently changing direction in mid-scene, working the crew to the point of exhaustion with 12- and 14-hour days. The pressure was overwhelming, but in spite of it all, Wilder was the anchor. He was mentoring young actors, reminding them gently on timing and pauses. He encouraged them when tempers got frayed. Crew members later reminisced that while Brooks shouted directions loudly and raucously, Wilder directed the spirit of the film quietly. And then there was the issue of laughter, too much of it. Wilder's deadpan delivery was so sharp, he constantly broke the crew. Brooks himself had to exit the room, sometimes, so his howling would not spoil the sound. The fix? Towels. Brooks distributed handkerchiefs and instructed the crew to shove them into their mouths when Wilder was acting. If he saw a row of quivering white squares, he knew the scene was working. One of Wilder's greatest improvised lines was used in a scene with Cleavon Little. In perfect seriousness, he whispered, "You've got to remember these are just simple farmers, people of the land, the common clay of the New West, morons." The line was not scripted, and it blew up the set laughing. Cleavon Little struggled to maintain his composure, and the crew fell apart. These modest gifts of invention imparted the film a bizarre warmth despite its acid satire. Although much of Wilder's more profound, emotional work was ultimately excised in the interest of pacing, nevertheless, whatever was left was sufficient to make Waco Kid one of the most off-the-wall, humorous creations in the history of cinema. But the production had other specters that haunted it. Richard Pryor, the most volatile comedic genius of the time, was the planned actor to play Sheriff Bart. He had contributed significantly to the scripting, infusing his own cutting-edge race and power commentary into it, and his involvement would have strengthened the film more. Warner Brothers hesitated, though. Pryor's substance abuse issues and volatility freaked them out. There were rumors about him coming incoherent during highs, and the studio was worried about insurance threats and scandals. Officially, Cleavon Little took his place. In private, Brooks confessed he had already resigned himself to abandoning the struggle for Pryor. The tragedy is that, although Pryor never did appear in the film, his prints are everywhere. The acuity of Bart's dialogue, the unsparing satire, the determination not to circumvent the racial cutting edge, all of this originated in Pryor. In a bitter irony, he created a classic without getting to live it. The Wilder-Pryor version of Blazing Saddles is still one of Hollywood's all-time what-ifs. But from this insanity, lightning struck twice. Between shots, in the midst of fatigue, Wilder casually queried Brooks, "What if the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein did not want to have anything to do with the family name?" "A joke, really," he said offhand. But Brooks stopped. Wilder later came up with a draft. Brooks read it and was amazed. The combination of respect and spoof, the gothic tone injected with the ridiculous, was masterful. That seed germinated into Young Frankenstein, one of the greatest comedies ever conceived, demonstrating that Wilder was not merely an actor, but a creator, a co-designer of comedy history. When Blazing Saddles finally arrived in theaters in 1974, it exploded like a bombshell of culture. The audience laughed raucously, but the critics were split. Some decried it as vulgar, offensive, and tasteless. Others praised it as a masterpiece. But nobody could deny that it had an impact. It showed that comedy could destroy racism, politics, and hypocrisy with a sledgehammer rather than a feather. It shattered the fourth wall, destroyed cinematic illusion, and had the temerity to expose Hollywood itself as a punchline. Its impact radiated